Good morning. I'd like to call this Basic Education Funding Commission meeting to order. Ms. Wilkin, can you please call the roll?
Argel. Delgado.
Here.
Bitterer.
Here.
Hughes. Isaacson. Here. Krug.
Here.
Miller. Ortitai. Phillips-Hill.
Here.
Rothman. Here. Schweier.
Here.
Sturla.
Here.
Topper.
Here.
Werner. Williams.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wilkin, and please let the record reflect that Representative Ryan Warner is joining us virtually. I'm Kristen Phillips-Hill, and I have the honor of co-chairing this commission alongside my fellow co-chair, Representative Mike Sturla. Today is the 11th and final meeting of this commission to take testimony from witnesses since we began taking our meetings on the road to hear from stakeholders all across the Commonwealth beginning this summer. Before we begin, I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, Representative Sturla, for some opening remarks and to read testimony that has been submitted into the record. Representative Sturla.
Thanks. Given the delay in getting started, I will forego my opening comments and go straight to the testimonies that organizations have submitted in writing. We have testimony from the Public Interest Law Center, the Education Law Center, PA Needs Teachers Campaign, Pennsylvania Educator Diversity Consortium, Pennsylvania Association for Gifted Education, Support Equity First, Pennsylvania Policy Center, and Dr. Ed Fuller from the Penn State Center for Education Evaluation and Policy Analysis. Thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Co-Chair Phillips-Hill. You're muted, Senator.
All right, let's try that over again. We will forego my opening remarks as well, and we'll just move right to our first panel. I'd like to call up our first panel consisting of Ryan Shum, co-founder, Charter Choices, Debbie Durso, member of Philadelphia Charters for Excellence, Policy Committee, and CEO, principal of Greenwoods Charter School, and Dr. Tina Check-in, and if I mispronounced your name, I apologize, CEO, Propel Charter Schools, who is joining us via Zoom. Before you begin, if you could please stand and raise your right hand so that we can swear you in. Do you swear that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And if so, please indicate by saying, I do. Thank you very much. And please proceed when you are ready.
Good morning. Chair Phillips-Hill, Chair Sturla, members of the Commission, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ryan Shum, a co-founder of Charter Choices. For the past 20 years, Charter Choices has provided accounting, back office, and compliance support to charter schools across the Commonwealth. I'll begin today by referencing several pieces of testimony that were provided in this room almost exactly 1 month ago. At the September 13th Basic Ed Funding Commission hearing, two of the attorneys who represented the petitioners in the school funding lawsuit testified about many items with direct relevance to charter school funding. I will share three highlights from Dan Ervik-Acklesberg's testimony. From his testimony, section 1C, the funding system is failing. The court explained why. Because the funding system has created manifest deficiencies in the resources all agreed were essential. Next, from his testimony during the question and answer at the 1 hour and 49-minute mark of the recording, Dan noted, when you have an underfunded district school, you pretty much have an underfunded charter school. And those kids, being charter school kids, have the same needs and charter schools need to staff up too. Lastly, for Mr. Ervik Acklesberg's written testimony, Section 1D, the system's failures are particularly placed upon the shoulders of low-income children and children of color. Stepping away from the attorney's testimony for a moment, I'd like to take a look at who charter school students in Pennsylvania are. Sourced from Public Schools Percent of Low-Income reports from the October 1st PIM snapshot for the 2023 school year, the percent of enrollments from low-income families across all 500 school districts in Pennsylvania was 47.6%. In sharp contrast, the percent of charter school enrollments from low-income families was 65.6%, almost 20% higher, 20 percentage points higher. Sourced from the same October 1 PIM snapshot, across all 500 school districts in Pennsylvania, 64.6% of students were white, where 35.4% were non-white in districts across Pennsylvania. Across all charter schools in the Commonwealth for the same October 1st snapshot, we find almost the inverse, that 31.8% of charter school students are white, with 68.2% being non-white. Immediately after Mr. Ervik Acklesberg's testimony, Maura McInerney, also an attorney who represented the petitioners, offered the following from the court's opinion. The court rejected a two-tiered school funding system of the haves and have-nots. Instead, the court expressly held that our school funding system must ensure that every student receives a meaningful opportunity to succeed academically, socially, and civically, which requires that all students have access to a comprehensive, effective, and contemporary system of public education. The court not only defined the quality of education mandated by our Constitution, but declared public education in our state to be a fundamental right, one guaranteed to every child regardless of wealth, race, or zip code. I personally suspect that had charter school students been represented in the same lawsuit, that the declaration by the court would have been that public education in our state is a fundamental right regardless of wealth, race, zip code, and or which type of public school a student attends. The court clearly rejected a two-tiered funding system, and I think it's imperative that the state's response to the lawsuit must not create or exaggerate a two-tiered funding system that punishes students and families who attend public charter schools. All charter schools are public schools, and it seems clear that all students deserve equitable funding regardless of what type of public school they attend. I suggest that it's critical that the legislature ensures that changes to education funding in Pennsylvania do not further inequities in funding the charter school students' experience, and addressing equity and adequacy issues for public districts must be done in a way that addresses the exact same issues for public charter schools and the students whom they serve. Currently, charter schools are primarily funded by the per-pupil tuition that is billed to the student's district of residence. The tuition rates for charter schools students are calculated with PDE's 363 form. The calculation provides an expense-based pass-through of funds, capturing a district's total expenditures less certain deductions, yielding a per-pupil amount for both regular and special education students. Three of the primary challenges with the 363 funding method are that deductible expenses can be subjective and debatable. There is no mechanism to audit or quality control the calculations of District 363 forms. And there is no timetable for districts to complete the 363 tuition calculations. As of PDE's November 2023 posting of 363 calculations for the current school year, 242 of the 500 school districts had completed and submitted their 363 calculations to PDE, leaving 51% of district charter school tuition rates being unknown 5 months into the current fiscal year. I suggest that addressing isolated elements of the charter funding formula would damage charter school students and lead to greater inequity. I believe the responsible approach to addressing the charter funding model would be a more holistic approach with a study of all elements of funding sources and adequacy. At a conceptual level, I believe that funding charters based on a formula that considers the sending district's revenues as opposed to expenditures would be more transparent than the expense model, and it would provide a greater chance at achieving equity and adequacy for charter school students. If adequacy targets were established for districts, they should flow to the charter school students through a revenue-based funding model. There are, however, several inequitable funding mechanisms in Pennsylvania that negatively impact charter school students, two of which should be addressed by PDE and the legislature with urgency. Both are a result of grant funding procedures that exclude charter school students. In Pennsylvania, allotments for the federal IDEA grant, special education grant from the federal government, is calculated on the number of special education students enrolled at the charter school on the previous school year's December 1st headcount. Charter schools in their first year of operation are denied federal IDEA funds because their prior year December 1st headcount is 0 because the charter school was not in operation the prior December 1st. There must be a way to include IDEA funding for charter school students who attend a charter in its first year of operation. The good news with IDEA funding is that charter school special education students become eligible to participate in this federal grant program in the years subsequent to the charter's first year of operation. This is not the reality with the state grant program Ready to Learn. The Ready to Learn state block grant funding is renewed each year by the state, but it only includes charter schools that were in operation during the 2014-15 school year. Charter school students who attend a school that opened after the 2014-15 school year are perpetually denied funding for this state block grant, which seems blatantly inequitable. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and thank you to the Commission for the many hours and miles that you've dedicated to the work of this Commission.
Thank you very much. Ms. Durso.
Good morning, Chair Phillips-Hill, Chair Sterla, and other distinguished members of the Basic Education Funding Commission. My name is Debbie Durso, and I am the CEO and principal at Greenwoods Charter School. I'm here today representing the 80-member schools of PCE, or Philadelphia Charters for Excellence. Thank you for including us in today's testimony. I've spent the last 25 years as an educator in the city of Philadelphia. I started my career as a high school English teacher in the school district of Philadelphia, and then I moved to Mastery Charter Schools, where I served as a teacher, a principal, and then a regional superintendent, serving K-12 students across both Philadelphia and Camden. I currently operate Greenwoods Charter School as both the CEO and principal, which does give me the unique opportunity to look at external partnerships and all of the compliance and finance that goes into schools, as well as the day-to-day running of a school, opening car doors, serving in the lunchroom, all of the things that happen between 8 and 3 p.m. Greenwoods Charter School, I am happy to say, has performed above the state average in math, reading, and science for the last 8 years. What also makes me unique is I'm a mother of 4 children, ages 8 to 18, who all attend school, and they have attended traditional public schools in the district. They have attended charter schools, private schools, and Catholic schools. So I really do understand what it means for a parent to make a choice that is in the best interest of their children. I have 4 kids going to 4 different types of schools, which sometimes makes the mornings impossible, but also really worth it. I'm here today, and it is with that personal and professional experience that I'm speaking on behalf of PCE's 62,000 students. And I've submitted written testimony, but I do want to focus on 3 key areas. 1, there is a funding inequity for public charter schools. Fewer dollars follow students when they enroll in public charter schools compared to their district counterparts. 2, increasing basic education funding through the fair funding formula is the fastest and most efficient way to achieve equitable funding. And 3, the brick and mortar charter school community must have a seat at the table if we're going to have a comprehensive conversation about what solutions are in play for our students. So I want to speak about these areas with some key highlights. First, in talking about the inequity for brick and mortar charter schools, I appreciate following Ryan today because Ryan really can articulate the complexities of charter schools and the current funding model. But specifically to Philadelphia, we have a number of examples of geographically adjacent public districts where the per pupil funding is $10,000 or more per student per year beyond what Philadelphia receives for students who attend schools sometimes just a few blocks away because they are inside the city limits. We would take this even further as PCE to argue that is equally, if not more unfair, that two students who may be next door neighbors would walk out their doors, go to two schools, one a traditional district school, one a public charter school, and that the student in a charter school would experience a significant disparity in educational funding. And finally, as parents who choose to send their students to a different public option, they have not think that they are receiving fewer tax dollars to do so. Second, we do want to advocate for accelerating the implementation of the fair funding formula. The schools represented by Philadelphia Charters for Excellence serve one of the highest need, most diverse, and lowest income student population in the Commonwealth. 79% of our member school students qualify for free and reduced lunch. 80% of our students are Black or Hispanic. 19% of our students qualify for special education services. The students our schools serve are exactly who would benefit significantly from increased application of the fair funding formula and increases in basic education funding overall. And just speaking from my own experience, when I worked as a regional superintendent for Mastery Charter Schools, I worked with both Philadelphia and Camden schools. And in Camden, there was comparable funding, which just gave us the opportunity to provide more resources, recruiting and retaining talent, transportation, safety, maintaining buildings, smaller class sizes, the resources that students desperately need. And lastly, we ask that you actively involve our charter community in negotiations and decisions on funding that impacts public charter schools. A number of remedies have been recommended over the course of these hearings, and today's the day you're hearing from charters. I know Dr. Chekin, who is up next, is going to speak about specific solutions. So I do want to really focus on the idea that PCE does represent 62,000 students. If you took our 80 member schools and you considered us one LEA or one single school district, we would be the second largest school district in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we do believe our students' voices and the voices of their families should be part of the discussion. It is not just that we serve 62,000 students, it's also what we bring to the table. Charters were built on innovation and the autonomy to make decisions in service to students. So we are innovative thinkers. We know how to think out of the box. We've been doing it for a while. We find creative ways to maximize our resources. We are entrepreneurs who regularly connect with national experts, and we're able to help think critically and creatively in ways to serve our students. And we are eager to be part of this comprehensive conversation. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I really do look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We'll turn next to Ms. Chekin.
Good morning. I apologize that I'm unable to be with you in person today. My fellow educators in the room know that it's that time of year where illnesses are unavoidable if you're in schools, but I appreciate the ability to participate remotely. On behalf of Propel Schools, I would like to thank the Basic Education Funding Commission and co-chair Senator Phillips-Hill and Representative Sturla for this opportunity. I also want to thank the staff who are working hard behind the scenes to make these commission hearings successful. I'm Dr. Tina Chekin, the superintendent and CEO of Propel Schools, the largest network of public brick and mortar charter schools in Western Pennsylvania, serving nearly 4,000 students and their families. I started my teaching career in a school district, but I made the best choice of my career when in 2003, I joined the staff of Propel's first school as a kindergarten teacher. We opened in the basement of the former Homestead Hospital just southeast of Pittsburgh. Our school was created because families wanted a choice in how their children were being educated, but most did not have the financial resources for a neighborhood or to send their children to a private school. Today, we operate 13 schools in 10 communities that have experienced population declines. Families that choose Propel tend to live in communities that are characterized by high poverty rates and low performing school districts. Nearly 19% of our students have special education needs, 86% qualify for free and reduced lunch, and 88% of our students are from minority groups. I want to be clear, we do not cherry pick or discriminate against any student during the enrollment process. Despite the challenges, Propel students are beating the odds and succeeding due to our student-centered focus and our relentless pursuit of excellence. When we look at a 4-year cohort graduation rate for Propel students compared to the district-run high schools in our areas, we're producing better outcomes for our students, particularly historically marginalized students. Propel's graduation rates outpace the statewide average by 3%. Our students succeed because Propel educators believe in them. On top of Propel's educational offerings, we provide an array of social and emotional well-being supports because we know kids cannot learn if they're hungry or if other basic needs are not being met. We put students at the center of every decision we make. The same thing needs to happen here. The commission's work needs to be about the students and putting kids first. The commission has been tasked with addressing the court's determination that how Pennsylvania funds its 500 school districts is inequitable, but the inequities exist at a much more granular level between students who attend district-run public schools and charter-run public schools. Statewide public charter schools receive 15 to 30% less funding than school districts. On average, the students who attend a Propel charter school receive 25% less funding than their peers in district-run schools. The differences are due to the deductions that districts can make in their tuition reimbursement calculations. Mr. Schum provided an overview of the funding inequities, so I will not belabor this point, but I will note that the inequities are compounded when school districts do not make their tuition reimbursement payments to charter schools. Currently, of the 30 districts that Propel sends tuition reimbursement invoices to, 11 school districts refuse to make their state mandated tuition payments, and we must rely on PDE to redirect that funding each month. And sometimes that takes 30 days or more. School districts do not have to jump through hoops to get the funding owed to their students. Charter school students should not have to fight to get what the students rightfully deserve either. There are some who may argue that the commission should only focus on equitable funding for public school districts. I counter that Judge Jubilier was very clear that her ruling was about equitable student funding, not the funding of school buildings or institutions. Currently, charter school students are punished by a public education system, first for their zip code, and again for the choice in public education. But charter school students are public school students, and they deserve the same resources and students as students in school districts. For the sake of time, I will provide an overview of my recommendations provided in my written testimony, which can be broken into 4 categories. First, policy changes that can cut costs for charter and district schools include standardizing the charter renewal process that's both burdensome and costly, ensuring the state's Charter Appeal Board is operating efficiently to prevent costly delays in cases before it, and mandate relief from duplicative and unnecessary provisions in the law. Second, there are policy changes that can be made to cut costs specifically for public charter schools, including closing loopholes in the law that prevent the approval of multiple charter school organizations that were created to facilitate shared services and cost savings, and providing charters with greater access to IU services. Third, reform how charter tuition reimbursement rates are calculated to ensure charter students receive their fair share of funding by resetting the PDE 363 form, by reducing the number of deductions a district can make from 24 to the 7 allowed by law, and switch from an expenditure-based funding model for charters to a revenue-based model to ensure predictability, stability, and equity. Finally, additional funding for all public schools, including facilities funding, resources to attract and retain educators and school staff, especially in high poverty schools, and targeted funding for the safe transportation of students to and from school. Also, I know that the hold harmless provision has been frequently discussed in previous hearings. Please note that your decision to maintain or remove hold harmless will have an impact on charter students and the funding we receive. I understand that the population shifts over time may warrant the elimination of hold harmless, but while school districts may have seen a loss in student populations over the years, demand for brick and mortar public charter schools continues to be consistently high. Lastly, it would be tone deaf for me not to mention comprehensive charter funding. which has been discussed for more than a decade in Harrisburg. I believe this topic is too complex to address without a thorough study into the nuances of the current funding structure and the needs of both brick and mortar and cyber charters. I urge this commission to recommend that the General Assembly create a commission like the BEFC to study charter school funding in a comprehensive and unbiased manner. Again, thank you for your time to speak today. Propel stands ready to assist the commission in the future and continue discussions around comprehensive charter reform.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn to my co-chair, Representative Sturla, to recognize members for questions since he is present and can see them.
Thanks. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two quick questions. So on page 5 of your testimony, you talked about the percentage of students that qualify for special education services, and that compares to state and local. What percentage of students are Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and how does that compare to Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 for state and local?
But I don't have those exact numbers in front of me at this moment.
Could you get
but I
those
can
to
get
me?
them. Yep, of course.
Thank you. And then Mr. Schum, on the first page of your testimony, you talk about you say across all charter schools, and you have the percentage for charter school students, white versus non-white. When you say all charter, is that brick and mortar and cyber charter?
That is all charter schools in the state, yeah.
Okay.
All 180.
I just wanted to clarify that. And then is there any difference in percentage of white, non-white versus for brick and mortar versus cyber charter?
I don't know. That's easily obtainable. I suspect they're not identical, but similar.
If you wouldn't mind sharing that when you have it, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Senator Rothman.
Thank you, and thank you both for your testimony. Mr. Schum, could you, in your testimony, you talked about the line on the second page, third paragraph, the court clearly rejected a two-tiered funding system. Can you explain or elaborate what a two-tiered funding system is?
Well, I believe what the court was referencing there was the very broad concept of the haves and the have-nots. One example of that would be suburban Philadelphia and some of the collar districts and the amount of local resource that is put into their education versus Philadelphia and some of the districts that don't enjoy such a robust local property tax base.
So local property taxes, real estate taxes, local income tax. So the alternative is what?
That's a fair question that I think I'm looking forward to hearing the commission's report to the legislature for those solutions. That is a great question, and I think the first question is, what are the goals, the adequacy goals? What is the minimum that every student or district should appreciate and enjoy and have access to? And I certainly don't know what that number is or what the method is to get there.
There seems to be lost in this that when someone, a resident taxpayer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, pays their local property taxes that goes to a school, that doesn't seem to be counted towards their contribution towards adequacy. Can you, either one of you, tell me the percentage of the children, where they're coming from? Are they coming from school districts that are considered adequately funded or inadequately funded?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that question unfortunately lies in the demographic data that we shared. And so charter school students who come from the Philadelphia School District generally reflect the demographics in terms of race and poverty of the Philadelphia School District as a whole. And that would be true across all 500 school districts.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Isaacson.
Hi, good morning. So I get to be the one from Philadelphia here. So I just have a couple quick questions, because for the general public that is listening, Philadelphia is not only the largest school district in Pennsylvania, it is also the second largest school district in Pennsylvania with regard to the charters that they manage. So I guess I'm kind of confused with regard to when we say about a seat at the table and having a decision. For example, the Philadelphia School Board that we finally have back in under local control manages the public schools, and that is the two public school systems that they are managing under themselves. What is the seat at the table besides the representation by your local school board? And in most every other 499 school districts, they are elected by the public to make the decisions on behalf of their school districts and any charters that operate within them. What is the separate seat at the table beyond the local school district board that is the one who is appointed to manage the school district's allocation of funds?
I would say there's twofold answer to that. I think one, charter schools are autonomous, so they do run under their own separate governing bodies. And I think two, there could sometimes, as someone who's worked in both in the traditional district schools and charter schools, there tends to be a sense of competition. And so making sure that we're hearing voices, authentic voices, and folks who are in the work, doing the work in charter schools does matter. And so yes, I agree that when you look at Philadelphia, they are the largest district in the Commonwealth. And then I agree, I said the same thing, that our charters really do represent the second largest. So making sure that folks who are in the work with them every single day, I think hearing their voice matters.
And I appreciate that. It's just at some point, there has to be an accountability, and there has to be a point of accountability, and that is the school board in all 500 school districts. And then there's not a separate school district or a second accountability spot for the public schools that charter schools are. You have to operate along with the schools that are run by each school district in the same. And so I think it's more a matter of the charter schools that operate within each school district should be working in conjunction with their school district with regard to their funding. It is not for us to dictate on high here from Harrisburg. But I understand what you're saying. With regard to the charter renewal, I also understand, and I've heard often about the want for standardized here out of Harrisburg on a statewide level. But again, considering that the funds are being withdrawn from the local school district to fund the students that attend those charters, that school district should have oversight on the application process. It shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all because not every school district is made equal. So that's just kind of a commentary. But I certainly have your testimony, and we've heard it. So I just wanted to do that. But we're running behind, so I can stop now.
Questions for other members, from other members? I actually have a couple comments and questions. One, Dr. Chekin, I will take you up on your suggestion of creating a commission on how we fund charters and cyber charters. We actually tried to delve into that when we did the Special Ed Funding Commission, and were prohibited by the language in that enabling legislation that allowed us to do a Special Ed Funding Commission from even mentioning the words charter. We couldn't talk about it. We couldn't understand how charters were funded for special ed students. We were prohibited from addressing that. So I welcome that and hope that we can move forward on that. Mr. Shum, I've got a couple questions for you, because when you say, you gave their statistics about, 47% of schools, public schools are low income, 65% of charter schools are low income. By and large, as I understand it, you don't get a whole lot of kids from Lower Merion that enroll in your charter schools. Is that correct?
I suspect that's correct.
Okay, and so those kids are high income, and they count in part of the 47% that you do when you say all kids across the state of Pennsylvania. So they're not if they sent some kids to you on a proportional basis, you might not have as many low-income students. So you've taken the high-income students and said, see, they're in public schools, but they aren't the ones that are sending. What do you have a breakdown of if you did a proportional basis of the students that are in your charter schools? What is the low income rate of the kids where they're coming, the schools that they're coming from? Do you have that information for us?
I don't have that information. I suspect it would be, first of all, push back a little bit, not our charter schools or my charter schools, but for charter schools, I suspect that would be very reflective of those districts, those sending districts, and most charter schools have most of their enrollments coming from the district that they physically are located in.
Okay. Another question for both of you, perhaps. When a traditional public school has truancy issues or they expel a student, they're still responsible for figuring out how to educate that student. When you have a student that has high truancy rates or gets expelled, like, does a public school ever send you their truant students or their expelled students, or do you send them your truant students and expelled students?
I can answer that. So we are responsible for truancy, just as the school district is for our students who are experiencing truancy, then we
Okay.
are responsible for managing through that.
So the public school district is not required to take care of your truancy issues?
No, they are not.
Okay.
For students that they were expelled, I will say, I've never actually, in my 25 years, recommended a student to be expelled from a school that I worked at in any form as a principal, regional superintendent, or now as the CEO, because I do believe that all students have the right to an education, and it is our responsibility to ensure that we are serving our students. And so if there is a student who attends my school who we may not have the ability to provide what they need, we then work with the families to find them a correct placement in an alternative placement school or something along those lines. I have never actually recommended a student for expulsion in my time. That being said, if a student is expelled from a charter school, they are required to find another school, which may or may not be in the School District of Philadelphia, or it may be, and I'm speaking for Philadelphia Charters of Excellence, so I'm speaking primarily to Philadelphia, or they're in a cyber school or in a different charter school.
Okay.
That's true.
If the School District of Philadelphia expels a student and recommends to them that they attend your charter school, do you accept them?
If they are accepted they go through the lottery and they earn enrollment, then yes, we would.
Okay. All right. So I understood one person said 19% special ed students, and I thought you said 90, but you said 19? 19, okay, all right. So one of the things that, and you can tell by my gray hair, I was actually around when we wrote the charter school law. They were designed to be laboratories of innovation, and you talked about how you have the ability to do innovative things. Part of the charge to charter schools at that point in time, 25, 30 years ago, whenever it was that you were then going to feed that back to the public schools so that they could take advantage of your ability to have flexibility, and they would learn from you innovative ways to provide public education in the standard public setting. Do you do that on a regular basis?
I mean, I can speak to my school specifically because we are an innovative model. We are a green STEM school. We're connected with the National Wildlife Federation and really work at sustainable education. And we work directly with Lankenau High School, which is a school district of Philadelphia school right up the road from us. Their students intern at our school. We work together on composting agriculture. So that's an example of a great, solid working relationship. But I do think a comprehensive conversation on how we can further those relationships would be beneficial.
Okay, and I'm going to ask the cyber charters these same questions, so I'm not trying to pick on you. So how much of your budgets get spent on advertising?
I can speak to that for Pulse Schools. We spend less than 1% of our budget on advertising. Basically for our students who are enrolling, word of mouth is the best way for them to enroll. So we spend very little on our budget.
Similar for us.
Yeah, and that number varies greatly across the clients that we serve, and I'm sure it does across all 179 or 80 charter schools, somewhat dependent on where they are in their life cycle. Certainly a first or second year charter school, we'd expect to see more money dedicated to communications and advertising than a school later in its life cycle.
Okay. And then finally, do you purchase any services from companies that have CEOs with seven-figure salaries?
I do not believe so. I would have to check specifically, but no.
That's a fascinating question that I'd never considered before. And I'm thinking possibly if healthcare services are provided, there may be a yes answer there. Beyond that, I certainly don't know.
Okay.
I can't think of any off the top of my head.
All right. Because I don't know of any public schools that do, but unless it's some healthcare provider that they're. All right. Thank you. Yes, Representative Schweier.
Thank you. Actually, I have nothing for the testifiers. I just want, my friend and colleague from Cumberland County made a statement that I wanted to just sort of address, if I could, sir. You mentioned that somehow, some way, property taxes are not factored into the questions of accountability and adequacy, when in fact, throughout the entire court case that we heard, not only were the questions of low wealth districts front and center of the entire case, but low wealth districts with high tax rates, aka high tax participation, was a significant part of the two-tiered haves and have-not systems that we have allowed to happen unconstitutionally here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The fact that the adequacy studies that we've heard from our expert testifiers were based on total pupil spend, regardless of if that money came from a federal government through Title I or something like that. Property taxes, local income taxes, and state subsidies, special education. I mean, all of that stuff is factored in. So by very nature of the way that all the experts have testified and the court ruling, property taxes is very much considered in the overall question of adequacy and equity. I just wanted to make that point because in the heated environment of Harrisburg, and we were on the floor last night till over 10:30, we have to make sure that we're accurate in what we say, and I'm trying to do so respectfully, sir. But there's an accuracy here that has to happen, especially given the 45 years of history of inability to move on anything significant with property taxes. I don't want folks that may be listening to think that we're not actually considering tax effort into those overall questions of adequacy and equity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn it back over to my counterpart, Senator Kristen Phillips-Hill, to introduce the second panel and get them sworn in. And I would ask the second panel to start.
If Mr. Chairman, I just have one question for the panel, if
Sure.
I may, the current panel.
Yep.
We have heard that public charter schools produce better outcomes for students and do so with less funding than traditional public school districts. Can you explain how your schools have been able to do more with less? And could you also touch on what you believe you could do if you had additional funding or the ability to serve more students?
I think I'm the only one left who can answer that question, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so I think over the years, the ability to do more with less comes down to being creative with staffing, creative with resources, pulling on the connections and contacts we have, utilizing staffing in different ways. So a good instance right now is I'm serving as both the CEO and principal because I have an instructional background and was a teacher for several years. And so I can do both of those roles. It is being thoughtful in how we give our students opportunities and connecting with our local area and as well as nationally on who can come in and help us and provide information or resources or sources or conversation or, bringing in people from the local government to talk to our students, and that becomes an opportunity for them to learn and grow. I think if we had more money, we would be able to, at least at my school, start to think through how we can continue to close the gap that has grown significantly coming out of the pandemic, right? And so while we are performing above the state average, we do have a portion of our students who are not. And so we would be able to give them more direct resources in smaller group settings where they would be able to move quicker to catch up on what they've lost. And so that would be one example of what we could do with more money. I think there's also opportunities that we provide outside of school that we are not necessarily paying for that help students build knowledge and schema, things like after-school activities, things such as sports, that more money would allow more opportunities that give students a more well-rounded education, and we just don't have those opportunities right now.
And if I may add
Yes.
as well, thank you so much for the question. And I agree with everything that was just said. I think also being creative in staffing is one of the areas that we focus on. We individualize education for our students and our high touch with our families. One of the areas that we could use more funding in is in terms of mental health and wellness services for our students. That has taken a toll after the pandemic, and making sure that our children's basic needs are met is an important part of their education. So I want to make sure that that's included in the conversation as well. I also would say that K-2 literacy and literacy in general needs to be focused on. Over the past few years, we've focused on building a strong foundation for our K-2 students, because we know that if children aren't reading by third grade, they're 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And so we need to bring all of our students up to grade level for literacy as well.
Thank you. I want to thank all the testifiers on this panel and appreciate your willingness to join us and contribute to this conversation. And with that, we will turn to our next panel. Our next panel today consists of James Swan, CEO of Reach Cyber Charter School, Dr. Richard Jensen, CEO, Agora Cyber Charter School, Mark Allen, CEO, Pennsylvania Leadership Charter School. Before you all get too comfortable, if you could remain standing and raise your right hands. Thank you. Do you swear that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And if so, please indicate by saying, I do. Thank you very much. And please proceed with your testimony when you are ready. If you could please make sure that you turn on your microphone.
I'll start that again. Now I can hear myself.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Jane Swan. I'm the CEO of Reach Cyber Charter School. I would like to thank the Basic Education Funding Commission for inviting me to present the information today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's always my pleasure to come and speak with you. In August 2016, Reach opened our doors with 16 staff members and 463 students. Today, we are proud that we are serving nearly 6,500 students across the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in every single school district with nearly 855 staff members. The journey has been a great one. Our vision is to inspire and nurture future success for all students, and our mission is really to promote academic growth and provide cultivation of curiosity through integrated STEM opportunities, K-12 personal instruction, and career exploration. Due to the popularity of cyber schools and parent demand for robust, comprehensive virtual education, Reach continues to grow and serve our students. And I just want to remind us all that we are here to talk about the students and what is best to really help our students do fantastic in school and have great lives and really continue in all of our footsteps. Reach serves a diverse array of students from every corner of the Commonwealth, from gifted students who seek an accelerated track to competitive athletes and performers, students who come to us with all kinds of mental health issues, students who may be pregnant and parenting, students with disabilities or compromised immunization. military families who need to relocate, and others who seek an individual approach to education and a flexible schedule. At REACH, we do offer various types of schooling. We have a flexible approach. They can come on a traditional schedule, they can come on an accelerated schedule, or a year-round. So we serve students all year, and we're very proud to do that. Cyber charter schools are a school of choice in PA, which you all know, and the demand has continued to increase dramatically over the few years. Parents choose to leave districts for many different reasons. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. Sometimes our students come to us for a very short time, and then they go back to brick and mortar because maybe there is an illness or something that they just need to stop and pause for a moment. Right now, over 75,000 families have chosen cyber charters in the Commonwealth for those reasons. I'm not going to speak about the court case because I think we've already done a little bit of that, but I will speak to the fact that we deliver a unique learning opportunity for our students. The delivery model is different and the costs associated are different. And if you notice too, I have also given you the average cost to educate a student at REACH is approximately $15,178, and that is just a straight average across the board. There are many unique considerations and cost considerations for public cyber charter schools, including technology, of course, and the fact that we just took over, we are now an independent public cyber charter school. We originally had a management organization, no longer work with them. And so we now have all of those things brought into house. So we have to ship out our technology, our curriculum, our educational support. We have 24/7 technical support. We have a brand new learning management and support student information system, as well as enrollment services, student technology reimbursement, so that our families can afford internet, which is an important thing when you're in a cyber charter school. Facility rental to comply with all state testing mandates. And this year we have decided to use computers, so we will be doing online state testing in over 40 facilities throughout Pennsylvania. And as you can imagine, that's quite an expense, and it's also difficult for children as they go out to the different facilities that they're not used to being present in, especially if you have a child who has any kind of anxiety disorder. As you can imagine, this is a tough time for them and doesn't necessarily give the best snapshot of what that child is able to do. We also provide all kinds of family support and services statewide, everything from family mentors who go into the home and work with the family to set up their unique learning area in the home, to meeting them out in the community, as well as many mental health services. And my former colleagues spoke about that and that growing need for students as well. Individual and home therapies. With our 24% special education students, we could have a variety, and do have a variety of therapies that are provided in the home or that the parent has to take the child out to for therapy. Lots of travel expenses required to maintain and enforce daily attendance. Mandates including truancy-related court appearances, because we do a lot of that as well. I just want to tell you about a couple of our students because I think that's very important. Amanda, one of our students who has some learning exceptionalities, has participated in many STEM opportunities across the state. And one of the wonderful things she had a chance to do was participate in drone activities. And she now has an FAA license to fly drones. Pretty cool. Some of the innovation we're talking about. Eugene had a traumatic brain injury and caused him to miss out a lot of school, so his family chose to bring him to REACH. He credits REACH with changing his life and giving him an opportunity. Not only did he come to REACH, but he was inducted into the National Honor Society. He participated in statewide PennDOT Innovation Challenge and composed all kinds of original work. He is now in school and hopes to be a teacher. Actually, he hopes to be a teacher at REACH, and we hope he is too. In addition to that, I want to share one or two more stories with you that you do not have. Caroline lives in Erie. She graduated last year at 16. She loved the flexible STEM opportunities that she had. Throughout her career, she had a chance to introduce the clarinet and the bass and the piccolo and the piano and the guitar. She composed original music, and then she served in a position on one of the flagships up in Erie, and now she has a full-time position on one of those tall ships after her graduation. Pretty proud of Caroline, and her sister, who also attends, and is an Irish dancer, by the way. A couple more, two more, and then I'm going to let my colleagues go ahead. Jenna turned to REACH at the beginning of her sophomore year for flexible and reliable option for her education. She was part of a duo from REACH that won District 8 and was a finalist at the state level for PennDOT Innovation Challenge, a statewide competition I spoke about a few minutes ago. She is a devoted environmentalist, and she attends Kent State University at this time. So those are a couple of the stories, and I hope you remember and think about the students because they really, truly are the most important. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. We welcome your testimony.
Co-Chair Phillips-Hill, Co-Chair Sturla, members of the Basic Education Commission, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on the role of cyber charter schools in the education of Pennsylvania public school students. I am the CEO of Agora Cyber Charter School, and our students currently are roughly around 4,500 is our enrollment, and we serve students from Philadelphia to Scranton, Pittsburgh to Erie, and everywhere in between. We have about 600 employees, which include about 400 Pennsylvania certified teachers, roughly 20 Pennsylvania certified school counselors, and we have about 100 students or 100 faculty in our student services personnel. This includes a position we call the family coach. The family coach is a very important position for us because it's the main liaison between the home and the school. They are geographically based, and they work to be a connector. They work to build the relationships with our families. They're there as a point of contact. They are there to provide support and also assistance, especially in the area of technology and learning the technology and understanding how to be successful in our model. We also have certified school social workers. We have truancy prevention officers. We have an HR team. We have finance. We have operations. We have child accounting. We have records. We have related service coordinators. We have a technology support team. The point I'm trying to make is that we are a full, self-sufficient school system, and when taking into consideration the cost to run a school, I think all of that needs to be taken into consideration. With saying that, overwhelming majority of our staff are directly interacting with our families and our students as we aim to provide educational services through a multi-tiered system of supports. I am proud that we have a diverse student population. About 40% of our students are identified as economically disadvantaged. About 30% of our students have IEPs, and over 50% of our students are students of color. The reasons that their parents may choose to attend a cyber charter school are quite diverse. Regardless of the reasons, though, we aim to hold ourselves and our students to high expectations within the learning process. Our focus is to provide all students with the skills, knowledge, and resources to become successful lifelong learners. Therefore, we really emphasize at Agora the importance of creating a learning environment where every student feels they belong. I hear stories all the time of how our staff have created these opportunities where students feel accepted, valued, and appreciated. We know from research that when students feel like they belong, then there is a greater engagement. And when there is more engagement, then this leads to opportunities for that academic growth. For example, one family decided to educate their 7 children at Agora. 3 of them are now graduates and are part of our Agora alumni. The parents share how at Agora, students can build these meaningful relationships with both the adults in the school as well as with their peers. Their one son built a very strong friendship with a classmate in 2nd grade due to some of their common interests. The bond strengthened during their involvement in various extracurricular activities that are offered by Agora. The parents shared with us how it helped their son not only become more outgoing, but now it is having a very positive impact in his learning to the point that he is now offering to tutor other students. Additionally, we have 2 fourth grade students who are from complete opposite sides of the Commonwealth, but they have been able to build a meaningful relationship through their interaction here at Agora. It began with their 3rd grade teacher assigning them to do some group work within the online platform that we use. This led to the parents eventually encouraging and being excited about this relationship being built, so they allowed them to spend more time out of school using FaceTime and other resources. In fact, they also made a point to try and connect at some in-person learning experiences that we provide. We call those Agora Days Out. And these 2 have had a chance to continue to not only meet in person, but to build those meaningful relationships we know are so important within the learning process. I recognize the monumental task before this commission in recommending ideas as to how to address the educational funding that supports all Pennsylvania public school students. I understand that there are a lot of challenges with this work, and that is why I would just like to reiterate, similar to what we heard in the previous panel, that when considering cyber charter schools, to please understand they are still public school students, and that any recommendations that we would make sure that we are not creating a tiered system in the way that we fund or the way that we support all public school students. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I get you 2 to switch your name tags, because that way we won't be confused? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Good morning.
Testifier, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Co-Chair Phillips-Hill, Co-Chair Sturla, and members of the Basic Education Funding Commission, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Mark Allen, and I am CEO of the Pennsylvania Leadership Charter School. You have written testimony from Dr. Jensen and myself, so I would just like to highlight a couple of key points, if I may. Online schooling plays an important role in the education of Pennsylvania's children, particularly children who are disenfranchised. And we have spent nearly 2 decades developing a program that embraces all students, regardless of their background, their previous experience, or whatever obstacles they may face in their ability to learn. The Pennsylvania Leadership Charter School has encountered students from diverse backgrounds who come to us with many different challenges, or simply a need for a different kind of education. We try to meet these children where they are and provide them with the tools they need to help them succeed. We are responsible for delivering the same PDE-approved standards and benchmarks, the same career and technical education opportunities, the same graduation pathways and requirements, the same special education services, and many of the same experiences as traditional brick-and-mortar schools. We have similar requirements, as Dr. Jensen mentioned, for things like school nurses, human resource departments, accounting and business office departments, insurance, school counseling, professional development, and other public school functions. While there are certainly differences accounted for by the fact that a charter school receives approximately 75% of the amount allotted to districts for students who reside in that district, and the district itself keeps 25% of each student they don't have to educate, there are many similarities in how a public school operates. Like any public school, the largest expense we face by far is for salaries and benefits. Most importantly, our common goal is to give students the best possible chance to succeed. I have literally lost count of the number of parents who have come up to me and said directly, "Your school saved my child's life." And it's not because the other school alternative was a bad school or it was failing. It was because whatever that child's circumstances were, they needed a different approach, a different type of education that we were able to give. I truly, truly hope we can all work together to strengthen the very rich diversity of public school options in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to you, Representative Sturla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from members? Senator Rothman?
And I guess maybe all three of you could answer this question or maybe get us the answers later. But the percentage of your expenses that go to salaries and staff?
70%.
We are 70%.
About 70%.
Thank you. It's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Williams?
I have a similar question than I had for the first panel. For each of you, can you tell me what is your percentage of students you educate who are special needs students? And of those, what percent is tier 1, what percent is tier 2, and what percent is tier 3?
At Agora, we right now are about 33% are students with IEPs. I don't have the breakdown, but we can provide that.
Senator Williams, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
24% of our students are in special education. I do not have the breakdown, but I can get that for you.
Okay.
We are about 22%, and I can get you the breakdown. I will tell you that we have noticed a significant trend that more students are coming to us with more complex problems than ever before.
I would say that my traditional public schools are seeing the same thing of rapidly increasing need for special education students. However, I'm asking this question to try to get an idea because for my traditional public schools, they receive an allocation from the state that is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 based on need. And it's my understanding that the allocation to charter schools is a flat rate and it's not reflective of need. Regardless of tier, you're getting the flat rate for special education. So that's why I'm trying to understand the percentages and whether they are the same.
Sure.
Thank you.
Questions from other members? Senator Phillips-Hill? Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This commission has received testimony from individuals that represent traditional school districts. And their statements have indicated that they believe cyber charter schools are draining money from school districts. How do you respond to these comments that paint your schools and your students as a problem that needs to be dealt with?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, if I may, thank you, Senator, that it's... It is on. Let me just move it closer. How's that? I just would like to respond to that and say that that makes me sad to hear that because we really should all be working for the good of the children. Again, as my colleagues have said and we have said throughout this testimony, we get 75%, the school districts retain 25%. Often we also have to have our redirected to the state or even to get the money from some of the districts. And we are serving the best interest of the students.
I would add to that also makes me very sad. But it seems to me that there should not be, I think I can think of very few things that are one size fits all in life. And we are serving a segment of the population that is, for whatever reason, unserved. They're coming to us typically at a high moment of need. And sometimes, frankly, they're coming to us 1 to 2 grades behind where they should be. But it's not a competition. I think that there is plenty to go around. And I don't understand, we have the same independent audits, we have the same budgets we present to the state, we have report after report after accountability report after accountability report. And I don't understand why there has to be that mindset. I don't think we are a drain. I think quite the opposite.
I think the thing that I would add to that as well is, yeah, it is disappointing to hear comments like that. And I think at the end of the day, if we can all somehow come together and have some real meaningful conversations, I think what we would find is that we have a lot more in common than we have that separates us. I very much respect all of my colleagues that are in district schools. I know it's hard, and I know it's hard for us, and all of us are trying to do our very best to serve kids. We don't go into the field of education probably for any other reason than we want to make a difference. We want to make an impact in the lives of kids. I'm the product of a district education. I am grateful for all of the teachers that I had in the Allentown School District, and go Canaries. So I'm proud of that. My mom was an educator within the Allentown School District. My dad was an educator serving students with disabilities in the Northampton School District. I really think that we need to figure out how we come together, because I think at the end of the day, we all have the same passion. We want to make a difference. We want to serve kids, and we just got to figure out what's the best way that we can do that where it's supporting all public school students.
Thank you very much. Representative Sturla, have all the members asked their questions?
Yeah, except for me.
Except for you, okay. And before I turn it over to you, I do want to recognize that during the prior panel, we were joined by the gentleman from Philadelphia, Senator Hughes. Thank you, Representative.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask you some of the same questions I asked the last panel. But I also want to follow up a little bit on Senator Williams' question about what tier the students are in, because what we hear rather consistently, and I think, Mr. Jensen, you said 30%, 32% of your kids have IEPs. How many had IEPs when they enrolled in your school?
The overwhelming majority. I think the last time I checked, of the students that have IEPs within our school, we identified maybe 3 to 5% of them. The rest of the students have come with an IEP in hand.
Okay. And I think the tier that they're in is critically important, given the fact that the way that funding does work, as Senator Williams pointed out, was if a school district spends on average $25,000 per student that it has special needs. Some of those students have $200,000 worth of special needs. Some of those students have $2,000 worth of special needs. What we're also hearing, and this is where I think statistics from you, if you can refute this, is that most of the students you serve that have IEPs are the ones that are in the first tier, which is the $1,000 to $5,000 range. But you're still getting reimbursed $25,000 for those. And so, you know, Senator Phillips-Hill pointed out with the last commission that they were doing more with less, and I think they testified that they were getting 3% higher scores. I'm not sure that, to the best of my knowledge, any cyber charter school has ever met the average test score levels of any public school in the state of Pennsylvania, which would then lead me to say you're doing less with more. Can you address that at all?
I would love to address the state testing concern. So imagine you're a student who has an anxiety disorder. You are at home, working at home on the computer with your professional teachers and your parents to learn. You are now told you have to go to a place where you have to test. Don't know the people you're testing with, and the test looks different than the work that you're doing every day. What kind of test grade would you get? I mean, I don't understand. We are told in education that the best way to educate children is to provide differentiated education for students, to have universal design for learning. And yet we go to state testing and we say to kids, okay, now you all have to do the same thing. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. And it's time that we start looking at all of that as well. We also have students who come to us typically, and Rich had talked about this before, who are 2 to 3 years behind. And we are doing everything that we can to catch up. We have instituted new opportunities for students in phonics. We are starting that this year. As we know, there's a whole structured literacy program and framework that is out there that we all know our kids are failing everywhere in reading and math. It is on us to do that. So we are not only trying to catch students up, we are then on top of that testing them and saying, okay, this is who you are. And then, by the way, if you don't come to testing, you're scored below basic.
Yeah. Well, and look, I empathize with you. My kids went to an elementary school, public elementary school, during the Ridge administration when we identified distressed schools. And the school that they went to was considered distressed because the kids scored on average in the bottom quartile of statewide averages. That school started every school year with 500 kids and ended every school year with 500 kids. And during that school year, 350 kids would leave that school and 350 new kids would come in because that school served the homeless shelter. And so when I went to the principal and said, look, I can put my kids anywhere, why would I keep them in this school? Because you obviously don't know how to teach kids. They said, not true. When you disaggregate the scores of fifth graders, there were 87 kids who had taken the fifth grade PSSAs. 12 of those kids had been in that school since first grade. So you say, well, gosh, if it's really a bad school, those kids would be doing the worst. Those kids actually scored in the top quartile of statewide averages. Those teachers could teach in a situation, but so what I'm trying to get from you is give me reasons to say you operate under different circumstances. But if I just look at standardized testing scores, if I say, well, when the when the bricks and mortar charter schools say they do testing, they get better results. So therefore, see, they get better results. But when I say to you, you don't get the same results, you go, but no, there's a reason for that. So I want that explained. Yeah.
So,
I was just going to speak to that point that we do have a churn rate. We do have families that are constantly coming in and out. So it's a very similar situation of what you just described. We don't hide from our data. We take a look at our data. We work very closely with the resources that the Pennsylvania Department of Education have provided in the school improvement planning process. We are constantly digging into our data to find what are the ways that we can help our students learn and grow. And to the point that you just mentioned, we're seeing that exact same thing, that the longer that a student stays with us, we are seeing that there is significant academic growth. It may take several years before they get to the level of proficient, but then sometimes what we find is that they then make the decision that they want to go back maybe to the traditional school. And that's fine. We're here to help kids, and we're just going to help kids. But to what you just said, that is exactly what we see within our school system. There is a constant churn of individuals coming in and individuals going out all throughout the year. But those students who do stay with us, we are seeing real significant gains in academic growth.
Okay, and you can measure those gains, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I would also ask that the data be disaggregated a little bit, because we get dinged on non-participation when there are blogs all over the state, how to opt your kid out of testing, how not to drive that hour to a testing place and in a strange hotel and have them sit. You know, they have parent forums all over the state because there's no penalty, there's no feedback. If you disaggregated, and that counts as below basic for us. So if you took that out, your numbers would look very different. And I'm speaking as a school who has some of the highest SAT and ACT scores in the state.
All right. Do any of you have homeless students in your schools? Okay.
Yes.
All public schools now have cyber options as a result of COVID. And what we're hearing from the public schools is our cyber option costs $6,000 or $7,000. Why are we paying these people $15,000? Just tell me why.
I think a big part of it is the fact that you're looking at an add-on program and you're not looking at a standalone local education agency. And there is a very big, significant difference. That's why in my opening comments, I wanted to stress all of the people that are in our school. When a district is saying it may only cost $5,000 or $6,000, are they prorating how much they pay for a school counselor? Are they prorating how much they're paying for the truancy prevention officers? Are they prorating all of the costs associated in a central office? I don't think that's being included, and that's where I don't think it's necessarily always an apples-to-apples comparison, because we are a standalone local education agency, and that's why there is such a big difference.
Okay. And that's what, I mean, I think if we could ever get a commission that would look into what we're doing, we'd get to some of that. We have literally been prevented from even talking about these things in the past for the last 25 years. So
That's truly a shame. I remember when COVID first hit, and schools, all of our teachers have friends and colleagues that are in regular district schools. All of them do. And they reached out and said, you can't, we've been doing this for 20 years. You can't be expected in a week to turn around and suddenly teach cyber. We'll help. We reached out at an admin level to all of the schools and said, how can we help? Not one school responded. Not one.
thank you. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick question. You're familiar with, obviously, you're familiar with the Commonwealth Court decision, correct? Do you support it? Do you believe it's correct?
That there's inequity in the funding?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody?
Definitely.
Everybody? Okay. And what would you recommend to this commission about how that be adopted, especially as it relates to your schools?
Well, thank you, Senator. It's good to see you. I think it's important that we continue to have discussions. It sounds like there's been a lot of difficulty with having those discussions, that we talk about the cost and talk about the kids first, and figure out what is the solution across the state so that all children really do have a level playing field in education. And that's one of the things that I'm very proud of, the fact that we can offer that same level of education to our students in all corners of the state.
Anyone else?
I echo that, and one of the things that we realized, and some of the first panel from the brick and mortar had mentioned this as well, we are seeing very high numbers of students who are coming to us with mental health concerns, with facing trauma. Now is not the time to be looking at how to cut our funding at a time when we have so many students that we are trying to serve through our student assistance program, through crisis prevention resources, and other things. So I'm not sure exactly what the overall solution is, but I think the more conversations we can have, we got to find out what that right number is of what it takes to educate a child in Pennsylvania, and then let's make sure that we're doing what's best for all learners.
Yes, sir.
The only thing I would add to that is that mental health crisis is bleeding over into teachers as well. They're left with the same social emotional issues. And if we don't do something to provide some relief, they're just going to keep leaving. I worry about that.
It is a structural reality that exists no matter what school you're involved in, right? No matter what format, what platform you utilize, traditional public, charter, cyber, you have to have teachers. We have everyone coming in with an increased level of mental health support. The question in this space, at this moment, at this time, which this commission is charged to find a solution to, is the funding equation, which the president judge, in a 786-page decision, has indicated is unconstitutional and inadequate, and must be addressed. All right, must be addressed. I want to make sure that everybody who comes in front of us is accepting of that. Okay, because we have folks who deny a lot of other things in life. Okay, all right, and is accepting of that and is prepared to work with this commission, okay, bipartisan, bicameral commission, including folks from the administration, all right, to find a solution to this, all right, and not to push back against the process of addressing this issue. It has been a generational problem, which manifests itself in some of the reasons why you all are in existence, okay? It's a generational problem that has to get addressed, and I want to make sure that everyone who comes in front of this commission is prepared to join us in this effort to find the solution, all right? Because there's some people who don't believe that it's a problem, all right? So they're obviously not part of the team, okay? All right? I want to make sure that the team members are all going in the same direction. How do we get this addressed? We work out some of these other things that need to be worked out, but you got to be part of the team. And so far, I hear that you all are part of the team.
100%, and we are grateful for that type of thinking and support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And they did not say anything about Abbott, but you know,
I know.
Just for the record, everybody's going back to work on Friday. Okay, all right. Yeah, we're writing and recording. Okay. So.
Thank you. Senator Phillips-Hill, do you want to take over? I think we're done with questions with this panel.
Certainly. Thank you, Co-Chairman Sturla. Thank you to this panel of testifiers. We appreciate your contributions to the record here today. Our next panel consists of Dr. Adam Oldham, LPC, NCSC, high school counselor, Pennsylvania Coalition of Student Services Associations, Angela Marks, founder, Reading Aloud, Christy Bucher, CAE, Executive Director, Pennsylvania Library Association, and Susan DeJarnett, Professor of Law, Temple University Beasley School of Law, who is joining us via Zoom. And before we begin, if we could please swear you in, raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony that you are about to give here today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. And if so, please indicate by saying, I do.
I do.
Thank you very much. And if we could begin with our testifiers in person and follow up with Ms. Jarnett, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
All right, Senator Phillips-Hill, Representative Sturla, members of the Basic Education Funding Commission, I thank you for the opportunity to join you all here today. My name is Dr. Adam Oldham, and I am a full-time high school counselor. I am the chair of government relations for the Pennsylvania School Counselors Association, and more importantly today, I am here as a representative of the newly formed Pennsylvania Coalition of Student Services Associations. This coalition represents every student services association in Pennsylvania. That's the Pennsylvania School Counselors Association, the Association of School Psychologists of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Association of School Social Work Professionals, the Pennsylvania Association of School Nurses and Practitioners, the PSEA Department of Pupil Services, the Pennsylvania Association of Pupil Services Administrators, and the Pennsylvania Association of Student Assistance Professionals, or PASAP. Today, I'm here to deliver a unified message from the over 10,000 school counselors, psychologists, social workers, homeschool visitors, and school nurses currently working across the Commonwealth in all forms of public education for the needs of 1.5 million students. Pennsylvania must provide guaranteed and specific funding for student services professionals and programs. It is the law in Pennsylvania that each school entity shall prepare a written plan for the implementation of a comprehensive and integrated K-12 program of student services based on the needs of its students. And while there are many needs that students experience, I want to state plainly the harrowing reality that we've heard a little bit about already from some of our other testifiers. and more importantly, from the mouths of our own students on the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. Almost 70% of Pennsylvania students report moderate or high levels of depression. 1 in 4 of our students feel like a failure. And 1 in 5 students report seriously considering suicide. Recognizing that students may experience barriers that limit their ability to fully engage in their learning and in their school experience, student services professionals are employed to help address student developmental needs that arise throughout their experience in school. And while school entities are required to deliver student services, no specific funding stream currently exists to ensure those operations take place. Therefore, student services are often on the table in discussions about cost savings and cuts, and are often cut first when school districts are faced with budgetary constraints. And while it is true that a school district saves money when they aren't required to employ counselors, psychologists, or social workers, in light of the intense and pervasive needs we are experiencing today, are these really the kind of cost savings we can continue to justify? When a 12-year-old in West Philadelphia dies after an apparent asthma attack because her school did not have a full-time school nurse on duty, are we satisfied with cost savings? When approximately 40,000 Pennsylvania students experience homelessness each year, and the majority of Pennsylvania school districts do not employ a school social worker, are we satisfied with cost savings? When a struggling 5th grade student named Philip was unable to find their school counselor at the end of a school day because that counselor was dealing with an influx of other students, and so Philip tragically went home and ended his life, are we satisfied with cost savings? Our students deserve to go to school where student services professionals are available and accessible because the stakes can truly be life or death. The call for more student services professionals has been loud and clear for many years, and I have specific citations of that in the written testimony I provided to you. But this comes from the mouths of our students, from families, from schools, from state agencies such as PDE, the Office of the Attorney General, and even from our governor himself, who spoke to this earlier this year in his budget address. As well, earlier this year, the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania found that the existing system of school funding is unconstitutional and cited very clearly that more student services professionals are needed. And I quote, "The court heard extensive credible testimony from educational professionals and experts as to how other professional staff, such as school counselors, social workers, nurses, and psychologists, help students succeed. There was evidence that low-income students often require more support, and so an adequate number of counselors and other student services professionals are needed to meet those needs. While it is true that there was testimony that several of the districts have some of these personnel, there was also testimony that it was the bare minimum required by law and of an insufficient quantity to actually meet student needs. Bare minimum and insufficient can no longer be an acceptable standard for our students. Pennsylvania requires student services in our schools. Student needs are higher than ever before, and there have been repeated calls by the public, the state, and the Commonwealth Court calling for more student services professionals. And so why then, in light of all of this, do our schools still lack enough school counselors, nurses, social workers, psychologists? There are two words that for far too many years have kept Pennsylvania from delivering the kind of supports we know promote student success: unfunded mandate. The Commonwealth Court has shown that student services professionals are a key metric of the quality and equity of educational opportunity a student experiences. And unsurprisingly, schools with adequate funding are more likely to have appropriate student services staffing than schools without it. Considering the Commonwealth Court ruled that the existing system of school funding is unconstitutional and deprives students of the kind of access to opportunity they deserve and of the equal protection of law, student services are not an unfunded mandate. They are a mandate that must be funded. In 2022, the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency surveyed schools across Pennsylvania regarding student mental health support. And the #1 resource that was identified by schools by a wide margin to improve student mental health services was additional funding to hire staff. And despite all of this, there are fewer school counselors working in Pennsylvania today than there were in 2010. Despite all of this, 2 of the petitioner districts in the lawsuit had school principals also serving as school psychologists. And this is not an example of creative, innovative staffing that we heard about earlier. This is an example of CYA, of doing less with less, and not at all an example of adequacy or best practice for the students or for the staff that are expected to serve those roles. And despite the state's own guidance to avoid using one-time grant funding to hire more staff, such as the ESSER or ARP money that came out from the federal government, or the school safety and security grants that are issued by PCCD, limited year-to-year grants have been the only semblance of a solution yet offered to school districts. Bare minimum, insufficient, and unfunded are words that this commission must remedy through an adequate and equitable system of school funding, because these words have shortchanged our students access to student services professionals for far too long, from services we know help them overcome adversity and achieve success. Until Pennsylvania makes these words a piece of ancient history, we will continue to rob our students of a true and honest opportunity to pursue their American dream, and we will rob ourselves of the great benefits we all receive when our children grow to reach their maximum potential as healthy, productive adults. What we as the collective body of student services associations are here to say today is this: student services are basic education, and it's time for us to make that a reality for every student and every school across the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oldham. Turn next to Ms. Marks.
Chairman Sterler, Chairwoman Phillips-Hill, and members of the Commission, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Angela Marks, and I'm the founder and executive director of Reading Aloud, a nonprofit organization that provides structured literacy instruction regardless of financial circumstances across the Philadelphia area. I served as a reading specialist in an underserved neighborhood of Southwest Philadelphia, and then worked in a private elementary school before founding Reading Aloud in 2019. I'm also the parent of 3 adults who attended schools in a well-funded district in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I founded Reading Aloud as a way to address the shocking inequity in access to high-quality reading instruction across Philadelphia. We are a small Band-Aid on a large wound that I believe is cured by equitable funding. We work with students who are the least likely to have adequate access to additional support without direct school or district action. Reading Aloud should not have to exist. My focus is on reading, and so today I will speak mostly from that lens. 85% of juveniles who interact with the juvenile court system are low literate, and it's called the school to prison pipeline for a reason. I recently sat with a group of 8th graders at a school in West Philadelphia. These bright, engaging students are reading at a 2nd grade reading level. And they reminded me so much of my own children at that age. My own children, with access to all the resources for success at school, are living fulfilling, productive lives. And yet, as I sat with that group of 8th graders last week, I worried desperately for their futures, and by extension, for all of our futures. In 2022, just 31% of 8th graders across Pennsylvania scored at the proficient level or above on the NAEP. That number is significantly lower for our Black and Hispanic students and for those living in poverty. Analysis presented in the school funding trial made clear that these achievement gaps cannot be explained away by poverty or other out-of-school factors. Low-income students do better academically in well-funded schools than they do in underfunded schools. In fact, we know that 95% of students can learn to read proficiently, regardless of their background, when given access to high-quality structured literacy instruction. The stark difference in experiences between my group of 8th grade students and my own children clearly reflects the outcomes we can expect from underfunded schools compared to well-funded schools. My 8th grade students did not attend well-funded pre-K. They were not screened in the early grades. They did not receive early intervention. They did not have access to a reading specialist after 2nd grade. My own children did. My 8th graders sat in overcrowded classrooms with underpaid, exhausted teachers. They had multiple teachers and substitutes over the course of a school year. They were taught using an outdated curriculum, and they sat in depressing, run-down, poorly ventilated classrooms. Not the same experience for my own children. It's the Matthew effect. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The Basic Education Funding Commission can rectify these inequities. The Commission must set adequacy targets. Dr. Kelly's recently updated analysis should serve as a starting point. In addition, and if there's anything I hope resonates today, the Commission must include resources for pre-K, for special education facilities and transportation in its plan. If all adults in our country were able to move up to the equivalent of just a 6th grade reading level, the national benefit economically would be $2.2 trillion annually. We cannot separate K-12 funding from pre-K funding. It just makes sense to invest in a robust, high-quality pre-K experience and get our students ready for kindergarten. Prevention is much less costly in all senses of the word than intervention. Each day that a student is not receiving an education funded equitably is a day closer to that student entering and not leaving the school-to-prison pipeline. We need to be thoughtful and meticulous, but we need to act with a desperate sense of urgency. In order to ensure that 95% of students become proficient or better readers, our highest need districts must have adequate funding to provide everything that my own children received in their well-funded school district. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and for your commitment to Pennsylvania's children.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marks. We will turn next to Ms. Bucher.
Thank you, and hello, members of the Basic Education Funding Commission, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Christy Bucher, and I am the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Library Association. Founded in 1901, we are a nonprofit charitable organization representing public libraries, academic libraries, school libraries, special libraries, and the staff and trustees of these libraries. I know that you already received testimony from Dr. Laura Ward, a past president of the Pennsylvania School Librarians Association. We agree that there is significant value and importance to having a certified school librarian in each school and a well-resourced school library. Since you've already heard about school libraries, my testimony today is focused on how Pennsylvania's public libraries already positively impact education and have the potential to be a larger part of the solution to the equitable and quality educational needs of our residents. In Pennsylvania, we have 467 state-aided public libraries with an additional 175 branches and 20 bookmobiles for a total of 662 library outlets. Approximately 85% of those public libraries are IRS-registered 501c3 nonprofit charitable organizations. More than 100 of those libraries operate with less than $100,000 each year, and some as small as $30,000. While not ideal, our libraries operate very leanly. Yet, these lean public libraries are powerful in contributing to the literacy and education of all ages. I'd like to highlight that libraries provide extensive focus on early learners from birth to kindergarten, after-school programs and resources for school-aged children, summer reading and learning programs that have multiple benefits, support for teachers and homeschoolers, and career development tools. While the Commonwealth is still working to provide broadband and technology resources across the state, public libraries provide internet access, computers, and in many cases, Wi-Fi hotspots to check out. From birth to kindergarten, libraries provide a range of resources that show enthusiasm and joy of reading and exploring, group social interactions, and model practices for parents and caregivers to support these early learners. Activities and resources for early learners range from books, audiobooks, computer resources, software for preschoolers, games and manipulatives that teach essential skills to prepare them for kindergarten. Libraries designated as family-placed libraries also provide essential connection as community centers for developing not just the child, but the parent-child relationship and support of parenting skills through connections to valuable community resources. Whether a child is able to attend a formal preschool program or not, the library is a great place to encourage and equip early learners. School-age learners often find the library as an after-school destination. With caring, trained, and helpful staff, the library has materials for a variety of interests, from STEM programs, learning coding, comic book clubs, or reading to a friendly canine. Libraries offer so many ways to explore and learn. Many libraries also provide access to online resources such as tutor.com, which provides online one-on-one tutoring and even options in other languages. Of course, libraries are also a frequent meeting place for local, in-person tutors and their students. Perhaps the greatest benefits of public libraries are summarized in saying that they are welcoming places of voluntary inquiry and learning for all ages and open days, nights, and weekends, families with members of all ages, and regardless of resource and educational levels, can use a public library. The Basic Education Funding Commission has a difficult task. Not all public libraries in Pennsylvania are able to provide the same resources due to lack of funding. But one recommendation we would like to offer is that public libraries, with expanded funding for staff, be utilized with their existing infrastructure, programs, and activities to support and deepen the education of our young people. Yes, public libraries already positively contribute to education and literacy in Pennsylvania, and if properly funded and leveraged, can do more. To quote our PA Forward initiative from 2011, literacy is power. Libraries provide the fuel for you, for your community, for Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turning next to Ms. DeJarnette.
DeJarnette, but that's fine.
Thank you.
It's one of those names. Thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony. I am a law professor at Temple University, where I've focused my research and writing on public education issues for the past 20 years. I'm also a longtime public school parent. My children both attended Philadelphia Public Schools from 1989 through 2013. My scholarship focuses on the governance of charter schools, the importance of oversight over this sector, and the financial impact of charter schools on the overall system of public education. As with all testimony, I am speaking for myself and not as a representative of the university. Charter schools are an important part of the Commonwealth system of education, but they are not an efficient part of that system because of the way they are now funded. If the legislature resolves the equity challenges found in the William Penn case with no changes to the charter elements of the funding system, charters will be the outsized beneficiaries of the new state investments at the expense of traditional public schools. Charters are not the silver bullet to solve Pennsylvania's funding problems. The fundamental problem is lack of money to both charters and school districts, because charters are concentrated in low-wealth, underfunded school districts, and they suffer from that underfunding, just as the traditional schools do. Judge Jubileer found that charters in underfunded school districts do not outperform traditional schools, and in many cases have worse academic outcomes for minority and low-income students. The problem is that the unconstitutional underfunding of schools leads to failure across both sectors. The solution is the equitable funding required by the Constitution and use of adequacy targets to meet the needs of all schools. Charters and traditional schools are in this together because charter funding depends on funding of district schools. You've heard some about the disparity or claim that charters are underfunded vis-a-vis public schools. It's important to understand how tuition is calculated. It is based on the per pupil funding of the student's authorizing district, but that calculation deducts certain elements that are costs not borne by the charters, including federal funding, which charters get directly, transportation costs that the districts continue to be responsible for, and non-K-12 expenses like preschool and adult education. It is also important to recognize that the charter calculation is based on the district's prior year expenses. It runs a year behind. Thus, major cuts or increases in district funding will affect the charter tuition in the next year. Because charter funding is based on district funding in this way, the increases that are necessary for districts to comply with the William Penn case will also result in increased funding to charters. Charters cost money. Running multiple school systems duplicates administrative expenses and facilities costs that the Commonwealth is bearing through its public school system. Districts must also incur expenses related to the processing of applications for new charter schools and for oversight of existing ones. There's also the stranded costs problem, which you've heard a lot about, so I will leave that to questions if anyone wants me to address them. The bottom line is uncontrolled charter growth impedes the district's ability to plan and make efficient use of the funds to meet the needs of all of the district students, both charter and traditional. Charles Zogby noted when he was the financial administrator for the Erie School District that curbing future charter enrollment growth is the district's single biggest lever to positively impact its future budgets and avoid insolvency. So this commission must consider ways to increase spending on public education, but there are also several important steps the commission can take to reduce expenditures that are not going to education. Updates to the funding formula for charters will also enable significant savings that will help the legislature meet the funding needs required by the Constitution. The commission would be remiss not to consider the flaws in charter funding and to correct them. First, the cyber charter funding formula is irrational. A flat tuition for all cyber students would rationalize the expense of cyber charters and would save funds. This reform is clearly warranted as the cyber charters have built up a surplus of over $250 million through the current system. Cyber tuition should be based on the actual cost to educate the students, not the happenstance of where the students live. Second, the commission should update the calculations for special education funding for charter students, as was recommended by the 2015 commission. The charter school law, as currently written, provides more generous special education funds to charters than it does to traditional public school students. And it does not require charters to spend special education funds on special education. State funding for special education must be increased for low wealth districts, and some of the funds to make that possible can come from creating consistent special education formulas for charters and traditional public schools. Now is the best time to fix this disparity because charters and along with the public schools should get a big influx of money with the general increased funding. That will ease their transition to a fair system instead of one where they rely on special education funding to cover non-special education costs. Charters are a significant part of the system of public education. There are currently 162 bricks and mortar charters and 14 cyber charters in the Commonwealth. Although it is often argued that there are long waiting lists for charters. There's no reliable data on what those waiting lists actually comprise. A review of Philadelphia's robust charter system shows that many charters are under-enrolled now, calling into question these waiting list claims. There were nearly 7,000 empty charter seats based on the October 22 enrollment data in Philadelphia. I was advised by the charter school office that the number of empty seats as of October 2023 has increased to 7,634. Cyber charters do not have enrollment caps, and they provide ample opportunity for any family who prefers online learning. Given the critical need for updating of the charter school law and the need for careful consideration of how charters can best fit in to the thorough and efficient system of public education, a moratorium on charter expansion should be put into place until that updating occurs. Refining the funding formula to account for the true cost of charter school education will help the Commonwealth meet its constitutional obligation under the William Penn case and provide all students, charter and traditional, with access to a comprehensive, effective, and contemporary system of public education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll turn it back to Co-Chair Sturla to recognize individuals, members for questions.
Thanks. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for testifying. Ms. Marks, as you might expect, my questioning is for you. We've spent a lot of time in these conversations over the last couple of months in all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And at a certain point, again, as you might expect, I'm always going to talk about grade level reading and the importance of it, which I don't think is stressed enough. And for my library person over there, I'm a library person, as you know, all right? And reading is fundamental, and it's not just a catchy phrase. Reading should be a constitutional right. The right to read should be, I think, is the foundation of everything. Because if you can't read, then everything else is immaterial, all right? I need you to speak as eloquently as I know you can, and I've heard you, Ms. Marks, all right, around the issue of the importance of grade level reading as it relates to academic success throughout your entire academic career. You've talked about it, you've experienced it, we've been on panels together, we've been in conversations together, we've worked in classrooms together, we've done all kinds of stuff, okay? I need you to speak to this committee about that specifically.
I think it was actually a gentleman who was on, who testified, I'm not quite sure when, and it was a business person, and of anything that struck me through all these, it was his testimony. This was a businessman who was rightly very frustrated because he had tried to organize a program of local business people at his local high school on a Friday, and was frustrated because nobody showed up on a Friday. And I felt his frustration at so many levels. We've all experienced that. But what I would say to that gentleman is, if the one thing that a school is supposed to do is, when you send your kids to school, you kind of assume that the school is going to teach your children to read, right? It's the most basic thing. These kids are in high school, they haven't been taught to read, or at least, you know, close to 70% of those students probably hadn't been taught to read. They are attending schools in underfunded districts, in buildings that are unwelcoming and uncomfortable. If I were those teenagers, I wouldn't go to school either. It is just such a basic human right, learning to read. I think it's something, in my testimony I said 85% of juveniles who interact with the juvenile court system are low literate. I think it's something, you know, I think it's a similar number of percentage of people who are incarcerated are low literate. 48% of the prison population are estimated to have dyslexia. And I think there's an actor, Amir Baraka, who I suspect you know, Senator Hughes. He's in New Orleans. This is a gentleman who struggled with reading in elementary school. He came from a family, he lived with his grandmother and 2 siblings. Education was very important to them. The school, by 2nd grade, was not able to teach him to read. He was made to feel stupid. He felt that school was not a place for him. He ended up going down a path that none of us want for our children and ended up in jail. It was when he was in jail that he was screened for dyslexia. He found out that he has dyslexia. He got the support that he needed. He turned his life around. He worked really, really hard to learn to read and is now a successful actor. And I think his line when he said to me very, very clearly is, had I been taught properly in 2nd grade, had my teachers had the tools to teach me how to read properly, I wouldn't have taken this path. It's that simple. I'm not sure if that answered your question. But
It's very, very helpful. It reaches beyond the numbers, reaches beyond the statistics, makes it very, very personal. And once again, I would say to all those of us on this commission and those of us who have testified and those of us who may be paying attention, if we are not addressing that fundamental issue, which is this issue of non-grade level, I think the state assessments just came out. I think I saw that a couple weeks ago. And if we, and there's a performance issue in this space, every geography in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, even in well-funded districts, okay? And it is a national phenomenon as well. I call it the academic pandemic that we're all suffering from, all right? This issue of grade level reading, grade level literacy, all right? And us being so far behind, all right? Only impacted more by the COVID pandemic, all right? Has got to be fundamental in terms of how we go forward, all right? When we get to the right numbers, we get to the right financing, and we talk about a programmatic thrust, has got to be fundamental. I remember that businessman from I think he was from Central Pennsylvania. He was an interesting guy, okay? I remember his testimony, all right? But going through the work that we have been involved in, okay? Read to Succeed, all of that good work, all right? It is fundamental that we deal with this issue of grade level reading, and I might add grade level mathematics as well, the ability to compute.
If I may, there's multiple studies have shown 95% of our students, regardless of their background, can learn to read proficiently.
Yes.
Regardless of their background. We're not doing rocket science here. We're teaching kids to read. We know how to do it when the funds are there.
And some of this is much of this is a funding issue. Some of this is a curriculum kind of conversation about what's being put out as appropriate curriculum. That's probably a longer conversation that we need to engage with at some point. But I just want to thank all of you for your testimony. I wanted to focus specifically on this area. We do a lot of stuff there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Argo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Oldham, on page 5 of your testimony, you talked about priorities, unfunded mandates, and the idea that, of course, you think mandates that should be there. The Senate Education Committee at the end of the month at Senator Coleman's request is going to be holding a public hearing in Allentown on looking at that exact question. And so we're on deadline today, so I'm not going to ask for an answer here, but any suggestions that you can provide us on what mandates you think should be removed so that we then have more resources to devote to other important mandates, that would be much appreciated. And so if you can get back to me on that. A second point I want to make, and and I've been making a list through the 11 public hearings that we've done as we come to the end of this schedule, is just a challenge that I'm asking anyone for guidance on, because we have a dichotomy here. And look back 50 years. I mean, our buildings are better than they were 50 years ago. Our teachers are better paid and better educated and better prepared. We've invested a lot of money in those decades. We have access to things that I wouldn't have imagined as an elementary school kid in terms of special ed and English as a second language and all kinds of really helpful extra staff for teachers, extracurriculars that I wouldn't have imagined as a kid, preschool, online. Of course, we weren't talking about online 50 years ago, better access to higher education. And yet throughout these 11 hearings, I've heard a lot of unhappy people with the status of public education. And so I'm really grappling with this. We've done so much, and yet we still apparently have a lot to do. And so any guidance, again, after this meeting that can be provided to me, to my staff, would be very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think it's just me and Senator Phillips-Hill with any comments or questions. So I got a couple comments or questions. One, Professor DeJarnette, if somebody else doesn't, I will be authoring some legislation to create a commission to look at charter schools, and I'm going to nominate you already to be on part of that commission, because I think you have a pretty good grasp of what's happening. And, you know, as you pointed out, look, charters are a part of our fabric here. It's a question of how do we make sure everybody gets their appropriate fair levels to make sure that we can all work together. So thank you for your testimony. And we'll hear more from you on that commission, I swear. I want to talk a little bit about this notion again that Senator Hughes raised with, as I understand it, there are multiple longitudinal studies that say if a child can read at third grade level by the time they are in third grade, and if they can do math at seventh grade level by the time they are in seventh grade, that you can basically put that child in a school where there's 12 different teachers and 6 different substitutes and bad ventilation for a year, and they're still going to be able to learn because they have the tools necessary to learn in spite of their surroundings, their bad teacher that year, their situation at home. They can go sit in a corner somewhere by themselves and teach themselves if they have those skills. But without those skill sets, we're playing catch up 24/7 for the rest of their lives. I mean, is that pretty much the basis of this?
I would say we're playing catch up in kindergarten right now. Our kids are coming to us in kindergarten already behind, so we're already playing catch up. When you think about what makes a proficient reader, a lot of it's not just the phonics. So, you know, by third grade, we hope that those kids can decode those words, of course. But when you think about what makes a proficient reader, if you think about it of strands of a rope, we're looking at comprehension, we're looking at vocabulary, we're looking at their inferential skills, we're looking at their written expression. It's a lot of pieces that have to come together, and those continue to grow and need to be taught. So I'm not sure that I would agree that, you know, once they get to third grade, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the basics need to be there, and we are playing catch up in kindergarten right now.
Well, and I've been a huge advocate for publicly funded K3, K4, because I do see that kids are showing up in kindergarten and first grade. Some kids can't identify letters in the alphabet, and other kids are reading at or above grade level. Absolutely. And that disparity is huge. I know there's also statistics about the number of words that kids are exposed to, and what that does in terms of their reading and comprehension abilities. Do you have any of those statistics you can give us?
I wish I did off the top of my head. I'd be happy to share them with you. It is staggering, though, and I wish it's in the millions that children who've attended a well-funded pre-K and whose families have been educated on how to work with their children, the amount of words that they've been exposed to compared to a student who hasn't had that experience, it's staggering. So it's not just that, again, that phonics piece of recognizing, letters and letter sounds. It goes way beyond that.
Yeah. Okay. And then, Ms. Bucher, you talked about the after-school programs, the weekend programs, the summer programs. When schools aren't in session, it would seem to me, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but that those demands would be the highest in areas of the most poverty, because those kids aren't vacationing in Europe during the summer. They're vacationing in their neighborhood, and their only access to books and computers is at the library, not at their parents' house or their friend's house or somebody else. Is that pretty much true? So would you suggest that some of the additional funding we do for some of the after-school, summer, and enrichment programs be tied to the level of income that you're serving?
Public libraries do serve that important after-school wraparound repetition of reading. The youngest learners are coming with their family, so that aspect of that pre-K and building those reading skills is not just for that student, but also the parent or the caregiver who can adequately reinforce that. And they sometimes are English language learners or struggling even as adults with low literacy. So whatever we can do to encourage and repeat and reinforce that, whether it's after school or summer learning, absolutely. And that, unfortunately, yes, we know that in poverty areas, that is really particularly important, but even in well-funded school districts, that public library engaging and encouragement is super important for all students.
Okay.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Just something, too, with literacy, I think that's very important to recognize early intervention and recognizing student needs before they become pervasive, getting to 8th grade and not being able to read. The need to have certified school psychologists available in a reasonable staffing ratio, not 1 to 10,000, or 1,000, or one that's also a principal trying to do both jobs at the same time. Having adequate staff to be able to intervene early so that student doesn't now start to tell themselves in 8th grade, I'm stupid, I can't do anything, because that student grows up into an adult that tells themselves, I'm stupid, I can't do anything, and is probably underperforming and is probably misunderstanding their full capacity. Maybe they just don't read as fast as someone else. But that would have been a lot more efficiently handled, cost savings wise, in kindergarten or 1st grade than now that 17, 18-year-old didn't show up to the job fair thing that the guy wanted to do because they didn't think they were capable.
Yeah. So I want to ask you one final question then, Dr. Oldham. You talked about not doing one-time funding for counseling and things like that, and I agree. Until we get the level of funding up to where we need, there are some schools that are in dire need of having a single counselor, a single school nurse, So one of the things that I've been an advocate for is saying, look, if we're going to get adequate funding within 5 to 7 years, let's put some emergency funding in, that I call it, so that there are at least bare minimums. Because as you point out, even bare minimums aren't enough, but there's some that don't even have the bare minimum. Would you advocate for at least some emergency funds over the next couple of years to get those school districts at least the bare minimum while we start to fund your school district at a rate where they can start to actually build that into their budgets?
If that funding is presented in such a way that it is going to be guaranteed available year to year to year and not in a, well, we'll see what happens next year kind of format. In my testimony, I cited one of the districts that was cited in the court case where, again, a district was able to put together a community partnership with some grant funding, and they were able to hire this professional that came in and helped work with students and families, and it was really great. but then the business in town that helped fund the grant went out of business, and then that person was no longer available. And so all of those relationships that were built are just no longer there, but it was an example of one more person leaving that child's life. And so I don't want us to create a system where one more person is leaving and there's this constant churn of supportive people. However, if as part of a broader strategy that involves systemic ongoing funding, grant is the way we do it, that would be the only way I think efficiently schools could. Because we know schools will spend the money. If you're going to give it to them, they will do their best to meet those needs. But we don't want to do it in a way that then just creates one more letdown for a family or a student when that person is no longer there next year.
Okay, thank you. All right, Senator Phillips-Hill, I think we're back to you.
Well, thank you very much to all of our testifiers today for wrapping up our series of meetings. Per this commission's unanimous vote, our report to the General Assembly is due January 11th. All of the information, including the testimony that was provided today, can be found on the commission's website. That is basiceducationfundingcommission.com. And all comments that are submitted through the website are made publicly available and will be part of the commission's report. And with that, this commission stands in recess until the call of the chairs. Thank you very much.